Okay, so welcome to creating 101 versions of your Canvas quiz in minutes. Now, I'm not actually going to create 101 versions, but I'm going to tell you how you could possibly do that with banks. So first, just welcome to this session. We have about 45 minutes here and we have a good bit of material to cover. So you have been muted. We have a moderator who will respond to quick questions in the chat or alert me to questions to answer verbally, and tell me if you need me to slow down at any point. So first of all, why would you use question banks in your Canvas quizzes? Well, one reason is to store questions for easy access later. Perhaps you want to take a couple questions from quiz 1, 2, and 3 for the final exam, or maybe you just want to have them in a group so you can search for them in a later course. Storing questions for easy access. Another reason to use banks is to shuffle or randomize all questions in classic quizzes. So new quizzes actually has a setting where you can shuffle all questions. With classic quizzes, the only way to do that is to have those questions linked to a question bank. Also, you could shuffle or randomize groups of questions. So let me explain what I mean by shuffling and by randomizing. So shuffling, in my opinion, the way I use that is I have 5 questions and I want them to be in a different order for every student. So that is shuffling those 5 questions. You can also randomize the questions. Say I want to give the students 5 questions out of these 20. So for each student, you're going to choose 5 questions from this 20 question bank, and it'll be 5 different questions. So that's what I mean by shuffling and randomizing. So let's talk a little bit about classic quizzes and new quizzes. So a lot of you may have used classic quizzes. You may have started using new quizzes. I will say, if you are using quizzes for the first time, I urge you to start with new quizzes because Canvas timeline is set to discontinue classic quizzes in July. So if you have never used a quiz, this is your first time, you might as well start with the new quizzes. Don't worry if you're using classic quizzes, you'll have them through this semester. And in this session, I'm going to show you how to take a classic quiz question bank and convert it into a new quiz item bank. So banks of questions, so some terminology. Banks of questions in classic quizzes are called question banks. In new quizzes, they're called item banks. I'll probably get that wrong once or twice in this session. So question banks are linked to the course as a whole. If you copy an entire course, they go with it. You can also move a question bank from one course to another. But item banks are linked to your account. So if you create new quiz item banks, they are always associated with your account no matter what course you are in. For question banks, anytime you create a quiz and add a question to it, it is automatically banked into a question bank called Unfiled Questions. So you can go back and find that from a bank or use that bank to move questions around. New quiz item banks, questions are not automatically banked. You can bank them one by one, or you can import material into an item bank all at once. We'll talk all about this in this session. So some things you can do in both banks. You can copy and move questions from one bank to another. Copying leaves it in the original bank and puts it also in another. Moving removes it and moves it to the new bank. You can delete banks entirely if you don't need them. One thing to remember is that those item banks for new quizzes are associated with your account. So if you delete a bank, it's gone from your account. You can import banks, whether that's from another course you have taught, or maybe your book publisher gives you QTI files of question banks. You can import those. They all allow you to randomize, and you can share banks from one course to another or even with your colleagues. Item banks for new quizzes have to be shared. So if you're co-teaching and you're both in the Canvas course using classic quizzes, you can both see any question bank that you have. Using new quizzes, you only see item banks that you own or that have been shared with you. So you will have to share item banks with co-teachers if you have, or TAs or anyone that needs to see them, and we'll show you how to do that. So these are all the things we're going to look at in Canvas: how to manage the banks, create banks, add questions to the banks, copy and move questions, and then of course how to add them to the quiz. And then I'm also going to show you how to convert the classic quiz question bank into a new quiz item bank if you are making that change now. So before we actually get started on the how, do we have any questions about why or anything that you want to see that I didn't have listed?
There is a question from Judy. She asked, what is the difference between classic quizzes and new quizzes?
Okay.
You talked about it, but
yeah, and we will elaborate. I will show you that as well. So let's get into Canvas. And now, can you tell me if you can see this all right? Does it maximize on your screen? Because I have a really large monitor, so sometimes it looks small. I see a nod. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. So I am in my Canvas course, and I'm going to go to quizzes. So simple first thing, let's talk about some of the differences between classic and new quizzes. And if you have a quiz and you have no idea if it's a classic quiz or a new quiz, an easy way to tell: classic quizzes icon is just an outline of the rocket ship, and a new quiz is filled in. So that's an easy way to see just from this page. So when you go to create a new quiz, it should give you the option: do you want a classic quiz or do you want a new quiz? If you don't see this, it's likely that you have chosen one and said, remember my choice for this course. If you have done that, clicking the 3 dots and choosing Reset Quiz Engine Choice will let you choose the other, reset your preferred choice, or give you the option to choose each time you create a quiz. So let's just create one of each first. So if I create a classic quiz, I'm going to call this Classic Quiz for Question Banks. So in a classic quiz, I have all of my details here, and this is where I would add my questions or link to a bank. We're not going to do that just yet, but this is my classic quiz setup. All of my settings are here, and I can save this. Now I'm going to do the same thing with new quizzes. So if I create a quiz and choose new quizzes, this is my new quiz for question banks. You see I have all of my settings here, but I don't have an option to add any questions. Once you save a new quiz, it takes you to the spot where you can add the questions. Anytime you're in this, to get back, you press return at the top right. Okay, so that was simply creating the quiz, choosing classic or new. Any questions on that? Okay. Okay, so now if I want to, before making a quiz, I want to go in and manage my classic question banks from the quizzes page in Canvas. I'm going to click the 3 dots and manage question banks. So here I'll have any question bank I have created, as well as unfiled questions, which are questions that have been added to quizzes but not stored in a question bank anywhere. So these are all my question banks. I can choose any of them and edit questions, or add questions, or edit details, move questions, delete the bank, all of that. If I want to add a question bank, I click Add Question Bank, I give it a name, and I press Enter. There it is. Right now it has no questions. So I'm going to show you how to do the same thing in new quizzes because it's a little different. So in new quizzes, there is not a 3-dot manage item banks option here. I first have to go into a new quiz. So if I don't have one, I have to do the step I just took in creating a new quiz and not yet setting anything. So let me find that one I just created. New quiz for question banks. So I created this new quiz. Clicking on the title takes me to the quiz builder. And now I have these 3 dots at the top right. And here I can choose manage item banks. So here are my item banks for new quizzes. Only one of them has questions in it. So let's look at this one. So it's a different look, but it's the same options. So you have your questions, you can edit them, you can copy or move them, you can delete them. You can also add new questions. And from the item banks page as a whole, you can create a new item bank. So here, new quiz item bank, and we'll create that. So that's managing and creating the banks themselves. I'm going to need to remind myself what else we were going to talk about: adding questions, copying and moving questions, and adding the questions to a quiz. So let me pull these up in separate tabs so I can more easily bounce back and forth. And if there are any questions yet, feel free to ask while I am doing this.
Yeah, there is a question if it's possible to switch between classic or new quiz after creating a bank.
I will, kind of. So I will show you how to convert a classic quiz question bank into a new quiz item bank. There's not a way to do the opposite. You can't take a new quiz item bank and use it in classic. But let me show you how to add questions to each quiz first, and then we'll get into the conversion. Okay, so I'm in my classic quiz. And again, on the classic quiz, on the main page where your instructions for the quiz and all your settings are, this is where you add questions. Now, if you're not using banks, typically you would just choose new question, type your question, and save it. If you have questions in a bank and you want to add all of them so that then they shuffle, you would choose new question group. Or, okay, let me back up a minute. Okay, so adding questions from a bank can benefit you in multiple ways. One of them is adding all the questions so they shuffle. Another I mentioned was adding small groups of questions so that those are randomized. Say you have 20 questions and you want to choose 5. So I'll show that now. So let's talk about if we have a set of questions, 20 questions, and they're multiple choice, we would want those to be the first 5 questions of our test. And we want the students to get a random 5 out of these 20. So we're going to say this is our multiple choice section. We're going to pick 5 questions out of this bank, and there'll be 2 points each. Then we link that to our question bank. We'll say here, exam 1, multiple choice. Select that bank and create the group. So now for every student, it's going to pick 5 questions out of those 10 for 2 points each. Then our next section is going to be our fill in the blank section. And let's link that to our fill in the blank, which has 5 questions. We're going to give them 3 questions, and they're going to be worth 2 points each. Create that group. New question group, problem sets. link to a question bank, exam 1 problems. It has 5 questions, but I want my students to answer all 5 of these, but in a random order. So I'm going to have it pick all 5, and these are 5 points each. Create that group. So let's save this, and then we'll talk about what that looks like. So if I preview this exam, I have my first 5 questions that are multiple choice, my next 3 fill in the blank, and then all 5 problems. And I just want to show you one thing before I pause. So if I go back and I preview this again, these are going to be different questions in different orders. Okay, so let's pause for questions and clarification, and you can tell me to slow down if I need to.
There is a question from Catherine. She asked, since classic quiz is associated with the course and fall 2020 course is no longer on my Canvas dashboard, how do I access my quizzes from last semester?
Okay, so what I would suggest is importing that quiz and question bank into either your new course to then edit it, or a sandbox course if you have one. If you don't have one, you can submit a ticket to the help desk or email the help desk or your ATSD, and they can help you. Canvas courses conclude at the end of the semester. They are saved for you to look at, but you can't edit anything. But you can always, if you own a course, you can always copy that into a new course or into a sandbox. You can copy the whole thing or take bits and pieces, and I'll show you. Actually, I can show you how to do that now. So if I have an old question bank or set of quizzes that I need to import into my new course, I would first go to my new course, settings, import course content. And then as a faculty member, you have a drop-down menu. Once you choose copy a Canvas course, you have a drop-down section that will list all of your courses that you own. So you can easily find that course, or you can type in the course and find it. So I can't actually import from this because this is this course. But if you choose all content, it takes everything over. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Hopefully some of these have quizzes. So if I just say I want to select content from this course, so this is if I chose select specific content and clicked import. Then I have my quizzes and I have my question banks. So I can do a drop down and say, I want this quiz and this associated question bank. Once I select that content, it will now be in my course so that I can edit it, delete things, move things around, do what I need to with that. So that is with classic quizzes. Okay. So let me get back to, let me go over to my new quiz actually. Okay, so we did this with classic quizzes. So now I will show you how to add questions from a question bank in a new quiz. So anytime you want to add a question in a new quiz, you first open the quiz to come to this build page. Then you click the blue plus sign. You can add a question on its own, or if you want to add a question from the bank, you click on this little piggy bank right here. This will open all of your banks in the right-hand side, and you choose the bank that you want to pull from. You can choose all at random, or you can, so that's choosing all from random. It's going to do 1 point per question. You can edit this to say 2 points per question, randomly select the questions. You just want one. So let me do that again. because I did not explain that very well. Okay, so we're going to add a question, choose the bank. This is my bank I want to pull from. I'm going to click all or random. And then when I edit this selection, I can choose if I want to use all questions or randomly select a number of questions from the bank. I also choose how many points they will count. When I click done, it's going to pull 2 questions randomly from that bank at 4 points per question. Does that make sense? I'm not seeing nods. Okay, so again, let me show you how to bank a question. So if I want to create an essay question in a new quiz, here's my prompt. These are where I put the instructions or the question. I have some options here. I save my question. So this is an unbanked question. This is pulling from a bank, and you see the pig icon here. So if I want to bank this question to use for later, I can edit and click item banking, add to bank. I can add it to an existing bank and they'll all be here, or I can pick a new bank, give it a title and save it. So I'll add it to the bank that I just created. And now you will see that it is banked. You do have to, with new quizzes, edit things from inside the bank instead of on the quiz itself. And that anytime you try to edit, it will give you this pop-up and you just choose edit in bank, and then you get this right-hand menu where you can make your edits. Okay. So now I want to show you how to import things into item banks. So if you have an existing classic quiz, I showed you how to import that into your Canvas course, but I want to show you how to import if you have a QTI file either from a publisher or from another quiz. Well, I guess first I'll show you how to get that QTI file. So, okay, if I have, let me find one. So this is a quiz, a classic quiz. It has 2 questions in it, so that will work for me. Okay. So if I want these 2 classic quiz questions to be added to a new quiz item bank, actually, let me pause. Let me explain that better and show you a little more in depth. Because a lot of people have asked, I have a new or a classic quiz question bank, and I want that to be a new quiz item bank, not just a quiz. So if I have this classic quiz question bank, I want to convert that into a new quiz item bank. The way to do it now is a little intensive. So I'm going to walk through it slowly. I'm not sure if Canvas is going to change the directions for this once classic quizzes are no longer. So this is how we do it now. Okay, so I have my classic quiz question bank, and I'm actually going to rename this just so it's easier for me to find. Classic quiz question bank to convert. You wouldn't have to do this. That's just for my use right now. Do I need to pause for questions? I see the chat.
Yes, there are a few questions.
Okay.
Yes. Maureen asked if she migrated quizzes from classic to new, and then now both are showing in the question bank section. So she's asking if it's safe to delete one because both are showing in the gradebook as well.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. I'll save this. So if you have a classic quiz and you want to turn it into a new quiz, and this has nothing to do with banking, this is just migrating a quiz to a new quiz. You click these three dots and you choose migrate. That leaves your classic quiz there and creates a new version in the new quiz format. So if you just want to use the new quiz, you would then need to delete that classic quiz or at least unpublish it. If you just unpublish it, it'll still be in your view of the quizzes and the gradebook, but the students won't see it. But once you migrate it, if you're using the new quiz to give to students, you don't have a use for the classic quiz anymore. So it is fine to delete it as long as no one has taken it in that course. Okay. So one thing I do want to say, if you have a quiz that is linked to a question bank, just like I showed you earlier, so the questions are not put into the quiz itself, they're pulled from a question bank. When you move that quiz to a new course, you also have to move the question bank. So in the conversion from a classic quiz to a new quiz, if your questions are pulled from a question bank, you might have to do it differently. And that's what I'm going to show you now, is taking a question bank from the classic version, moving it to a new quiz item bank, because there are some steps. So I want to make sure I get through this. So I have my manage question banks. This is for classic quizzes, question banks. I have my bank that I want to convert. And again, you don't have to change the title. That was just for me to be able to find it easily. I have my bank that I want to convert. I know that it's these 10 questions that I want. And now I need to get those into the new quiz banked format. I'm going to create a quiz. And this in turn shows you something else I wanted to show you at the same time. So I'm going to create a classic quiz because these are classic quiz questions. Instead of doing the question group and linking to the bank to randomly pull, I'm going to find questions. And this is also a way, if you don't want to link to the bank, but you know you have a question in a bank that you want to use, you click Find Questions, and then you find that bank, select all questions, or if you don't want all of them, you can select each one. And we're going to add these questions to this quiz. So now we've taken that classic quiz question bank, added the questions to a classic quiz. And we're going to save this. So this is my classic quiz that I've pulled the questions from the bank that I want to convert. I go to settings in my course, and I'm going to export course content. I'm going to choose to export a quiz, and I need to find that classic quiz to move is what I titled it. So this is the quiz that includes all of the questions of the question bank I want to convert as questions, not as a linkage to a question bank. I'm going to create that export. And anytime you export something from your Canvas course, you'll see this new export here. Clicking that downloads the file to your computer. So I'm going to make sure I'm sharing my entire screen so that you can see. That just downloaded to my computer. And now I'm in the course, or the, it could be in the same course, but now I'm where I want to make those questions into a new quiz item bank. So I'm going to go to quizzes. Again, to get to the new quiz item banks, I have to click on a new quiz. There is not a 3 dots and manage banks before you get into the quiz itself. So I'm going to click on a new quiz. I'm going to click these three dots and manage item banks. I'm going to create a bank, conversion from classic. You would probably call it chapter 3 test, whatever, but conversion from classic, create bank. I'm going to open this bank and choose to import content. So three dots, import content. It's going to ask me for a QTI file, which is what I just exported from that classic quiz. So here it is. The title of the file is going to be the title of your course, not the title of the quiz. So that is something to know. I upload that file, click import, and now those questions that were in a classic quiz question bank were added to a classic quiz, exported, and then imported into a new quiz item bank are here for me to use in the new quiz format. And I know that that is a lot of steps, but that is currently the way to take classic quiz question banks and convert them into new quiz item banks. So now from this quiz, I can choose the bank, select all or random, and from here I can choose to use all questions or randomly select 5 of them and select the points per question. And if we preview this, you'll see that there are 3 points each that I set, and it randomly chose 5 from that bank of 10. Okay. Let's pause for questions or other things that you want to see or see again or talk about how or why.
There is a question. It's about the question group. Professor Heath asked if when using a question group, is it still possible to show one question at a time?
Yes, yes. So in new quizzes, under your settings, you have one question at a time. You can allow them to move back and forth or not. And in classic quizzes, under your settings, which are here on the same page as the questions, you can show question at a time and choose to lock the question after answering or not. So this is the same regardless of if it's pulling from a bank or not, same for new quiz and classic. Okay. So I do also want to mention that you can have a quiz that has items pulled from a bank and items not pulled from a bank. So if you know you want everyone's number 1 to be this, you can simply add it as a question. And then if you have 10 questions that you want to pull 5 from for the next group, you can link to that question bank and tell it to pull 5 at random for X number of points each. And then maybe you have a couple others that you add from a bank or you just put in manually. And then you can link to multiple banks. You can create multiple question groups. You can add questions in between those. And at any time, you can also reorder where things go. Okay. Keep feeding me questions because I think I've shown at least once everything, but I'm happy to show things again and answer more questions and whatnot.
We have another question. Paula asked if she needs to create a question bank if she has, I think she has an existing classic quizzes to draw from. So she's asking what's the best way to create the bank.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me. Okay, so can you clarify, you have classic quizzes that contain questions and you want to create a bank with those questions?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
That's what she asked.
Okay, so if you have a classic quiz that already contains questions, they should be in a bank called Unfiled Questions. Now you see that I have more than one of those, so you might have to peek in it and see which one is the right one. So say this is my Unfiled Questions, where these are the questions that I added to the quiz, and now I want to create a bank from those questions. To get them out of Unfiled Questions, the easiest way is to choose Move Multiple Questions. This is going to pop up a drop-down menu of all of the questions. You see how each one is titled just question. This is why you might want to title your question. Most quiz options, you'll see you have the question title and then you have the question. Titling the question is just for you, and it's an easy way for you to find your question in a list. New quiz questions can be searched for. Classic quiz, you just have these lists that you can find them through. So if you have this Unfiled Questions grouping from questions that you've added to classic quizzes, and you choose to move multiple, and you say, I need this question and this question, and all of these questions to create a bank from. I choose them all, then I move questions, and some of these might, oh, you have to choose the destination, apologies. So you choose the questions from the top section, and then you choose what question bank you want them to be moved to. You can also say, this is a new bank. And this is my chapter 1 quiz. I move those questions, and now when I go back to my question banks, I have a chapter 1 quiz bank with those questions I just selected. So just to point out again, new quiz item banks, they don't create this Unfiled Questions for you. So for that, you would find a new quiz, find the question that you want to bank, edit it, and choose Add to Bank that I showed you earlier. We have another question.
Yes, I think we have one more question. Professor Susan Harris asked if there is anywhere like she can find a step-by-step written instructions for all of these that you're showing right now.
One of the best resources you can use is the Canvas community. And I will paste this link into the chat. So that's the main community. If you select your role as instructor and then choose Knowledge Guides, Canvas Guides, you'll have all of these options. We want the instructor guide, and then you have this long table of contents, and each one of these, so we'll go into new quizzes, has even more options. How do I move or copy a question from one item bank to another? And then we have answers with screenshots. And also there's an area where you can ask questions. You can talk to other Canvas users. It's really a great resource. They even have places where you can submit ideas or problems, and other users can vote on those, and votes, problems or ideas that get a lot of votes get attention from Canvas. So it really is great. You also have the resource of your ATSD and the help desk if you have specific questions. But if you just want to browse and learn more about things in Canvas, the community is a great resource. All right. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'm happy to answer more questions or show you anything again, or show you anything I may have missed. I just thought of something that I missed. So if you're in a new quiz and you choose to manage your item banks, you have your list of banks that will hopefully load before our time is up. Okay, so I have my item banks. I mentioned that item banks on new quizzes are private to you unless you share them with someone. This is how you would do that. So you can, so I could share these and then they would have access to my banks. Again, with new quizzes, you would have to do this if you're co-teaching a class, because they will not see your banks and you will not see their banks unless you share them with each other. Another thing I want to point out is I mentioned that the new quiz item banks follow you. They are associated with your account. So when you create a new course, they are there. So I would recommend, if you teach more than one course, which most of you do, not calling things quiz 1, chapter 1, but giving it a more appropriate title, knowing that it's going to show up in every Canvas course that you have. So, you know, English 2311, chapter 1 quiz, or whatever you need to name it so that you know what it is without having to click through it and find questions. Okay, any last questions?
We do not have any question in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you all for attending, and know that this will be recorded. And again, that Canvas community guide probably explains it better than I did, so feel free to look at that. These recordings will be available at the latest by next week, early next week. So feel free to check back on the Keep Teaching site to rewatch this if you need the instruction again. And I hope to see you later today in some more sessions. And thank you all for joining. Bye.